going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Contested NBA podcast. I'm your co-host, Alex Toma, and we're gonna get going right into my second solo pod of the season. In this podcast, I'm gonna kind of talk about the top four in the Western Conference, and then mention some other teams that deserve some recognition, maybe some disappointments, some teams that have been a surprise. Ethan in the last pod got into the Eastern Conference. So this is typically how it's going to be the rest of the season. I'll mostly focus on the West and he'll focus on the East. So let's get right into it. Going into the All-Star break, the Utah Jazz, I think, have been a surprise for most people. Going into the break, they are the one seed at 27-9, and they've been third in defense and third in offense. So they're top three in both categories. And I think it's been a surprise because at the start of the year, you heard about how there might be some rumblings about Gobert and D Mitch not being on the same page, and they were coming off a blown 3-1 lead. So there was just a lot of questions surrounding the Jazz. And for them to come out strong the way they have, it's been good for them and their confidence, I believe. And this year they had three All Stars. Mike Conley made it with D. Mitch and Gobert. Of course, we could debate whether Conley deserved it or not, but they had three All Stars, and the main difference from them this season to last season is that Mike Conley has been the difference maker that they needed. I was a lot higher on them last season, and I thought going into this year they would struggle for the reasons I mentioned earlier about chemistry and kind of blowing that 3-1 lead in the first round, but they've just responded, in a totally opposite way. They came back hungry this year. And what makes the Utah Jazz so good, we knew they were a good defensive team, obviously. Everyone on that roster can defend at a plus level except maybe Bogdanovich. They generate a ton of open threes, and the reason they do that is because that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert pick and roll is deadly. I mean, if you help on Rudy Gobert, you're going to leave an excellent 3-point shooter open. And then if you don't help on Gobert, he might have an easy layup or dunk, um, dunk at the basket. So, I mean, I kind of talked about him in the last pod, not going too much into detail on them because we know what they bring. Excellent offensive team, excellent defensive team. I think one nugget that we should take into consideration when talking about the Jazz is you saw in the past couple games before they started to skid in the All-Star break, like a lot of teams did. I mean, that's kind of typical, teams just trying to get to the All-Star break healthy, as they'll play a little bit slower up until that point. But when they played the Clippers and 76ers, both the Clippers and 76ers did a great job of attacking Bogdanovich. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone on that team can defend except maybe Bogdanovich. So I think in the playoffs, you'll start to see teams kind of exploit that matchup more. But the main question with the Jazz is what we should ask is, are they legit? And while I think they have been legit halfway through the season, I think the main question you should ask is whether or not you believe they're a championship contender. And while I think they are one of the better teams, I don't think they are a viable championship winning team. And that's just because, as much as we love Donovan Mitchell, I don't think he could be that best player on a championship winning team at the end of the day. And, if they get to the finals, they'll most likely have to play either the Clippers or the Lakers in the second round, depending on how seeding goes. Right now, they would play the Clippers in the second round as of today if both teams advanced, and I don't like either matchup for the Jazz. I know the Jazz, they beat the Clippers twice this year. One was with Kawhi and PG, one was without. Obviously, we know they destroyed the Lakers, but that was without AD. So I don't know how much you could take from those games. But at the end of the day, I don't think Donovan Mitchell is going to take you to the promised land. And while the Jazz have been excellent this year, I wouldn't buy much stock into them. But they should be trying to go for that number one seed, because if the chips fall their way and they get lucky and the Clippers and Lakers play each other in the second round, then the Jazz might be in the Eastern Conference Finals. So for them, it's important to continue winning to keep that number one seed and keep the season strong. So after the All Star break, the Jazz are sitting at number one in the West, and now moving to second in the West, the Phoenix Suns. I mean, I think we all expected them to be much improved. Obviously, with the CP3 edition, I mean, everywhere this guy goes, that he just turns the whole franchise around. But I think you definitely have to say you've been surprised that they are the second seed this far into the season. Going into the All Star break, unlike the Jazz, they've actually, I think it was some stat like they've won like 14 out of their last 15 games, something like that. They've been on a tear recently. They're sitting at 24 and 11, fifth in defense and seventh in offensive efficiency. They had two All Stars this year. Booker sat out the All Star game, but after going 8-0 in the bubble, there's definitely some promising things to take away from the Suns. And once they acquired CP3, you knew that they would be more than respectable. And while Booker has arguably been their best player, and you could make the case, right? Their best player, their best scorer, their best go-to guy. I think it's clear why the Suns are in a position they are now, and that is because of Chris Paul. And they also added a solid vet like Crowder to kind of shore up the wing. Um, and they've got very much needed contributions from Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, who are kind of their younger wings. So it's always good for a team to get that serious contribution from a young player, because without the Suns, to me, I view them as a more top heavy team. After their starting five, I don't think they have much going on the bench except for Cam Johnson, um, maybe a Frank Kaminsky on a certain night, a Dario Saric. Like, I really think the Suns are a top heavy team, and earlier in the season they were hit by injuries and kind of the COVID bug. So I think that's why they started off slow. To me, the Suns are a team need needs everyone in the lineup uh, at the same time. Because when you have Chris Paul, Booker, Crowder, and Aiton, um, not sure who their starting four is, but when you have the main guys in the starting lineup, they're gonna be a good team. They're gonna put up a fight every night. And DeAndre Ayton has started off the season slow, but he started to pick it up. I thought CP3 would elevate his game to a most improved player status, but we just haven't seen that yet out of Aiden, whether it's him, still getting used to CP3 or kind of CP3 and Booker maybe taking more an offensive load than I thought. Because going into the season, I would have thought that Booker would be their number one and Aiden would be their number two. But it seems like Aiden has kind of struggled to hit his potential with Chris Paul. But I think, second half of the season, Chris Paul is going to get him kind of on the right track. Chris Paul is excellent with centers, and DeAndre Ayton is probably the most skilled center he has played with. He's played with DeAndre, Tyson Chandler, Clint Capella, and all those guys are kind of high flyers that, they rely on Chris Paul to get him his alley oops, while Aiden is actually a skilled big. So I think that Aiden will for sure start to get it going the second half of the season. And one thing I am surprised about the Suns is them being a top five defense. Chris Paul is a good defender. Jay Crowder, obviously. Aiden, you would think he's a good defender, but I don't think Aiden and Booker those have that reputation as being a good defender. But I am surprised they have been top five in defense with the kind of the personnel they have. When you look at the roster, I don't think they have the defensive talent to kind of warrant that fifth spot. And I just remembered Mikal Bridges is their other starter, along with Crowder, Aiden, Booker, and CP. So yeah, I think they've exceeded their expectations by a good amount. I had them going into the season. I think they had I think I had them at like a top 5 seed, I thought they could be better than the Nuggets for sure. I thought they could be better than Jazz for sure, but I thought they would be more in that 4 to 6 range, and they might be at the end of the season, but so far they've exceeded expectations. And for the Phoenix Suns, halfway through the season, the same question you ask about them is what you ask about the Utah Jazz, and whether the Jazz or whether the Suns are actually a true contender. I don't think they are. I don't think they have the talent to actually make an NBA Finals. I think based on the matchup, they might be able to make a Western Conference Finals, but I think, excuse me, I think that at the right now they're kind of at a second round cap. I would expect them to be out in the second round and put up, a respectable fight. Whether they draw the Jazz, Clippers, or Lakers, whatever team it is, I think those teams would beat the Suns in the second round. I think the Suns could definitely present a challenge to the Utah Jazz. I still think the LA teams are kind of in a class of their own, despite them starting slow compared to the Suns and Jazz. But I think at the end of the day, the Phoenix Suns have a second round cap, and you know, and honestly, that's fine. I mean, the Suns have been since Nash kind of retired. They have been a laughing stock, sort of. They drafted Booker and completely like messed up on every pick. I know if you want to say Aiden was, if they messed up that pick or not with Luke on the board, but them bringing in CP3 was that much needed veteran leadership that they have been missing post Nash, and the fact that Chris Paul is still an All-Star at this stage in his career just speaks to the type of player he is, and um, just like shout out to the Suns. After the 8-0 bubble run, you saw kind of the making of a team that's starting to become more respectable. But then Chris Paul just kind of took them over the top. So the Suns' first half of the season has gone as well as you would hope if you were the Phoenix Suns or a Suns fan. Will they sustain a second seed in the West? I'm not too sure. Are they a true contender? I don't think so, but they have been more than respectable. All right. Now we're moving on to the Lake Show, who sit at third in the West at 24 and 13. They are first in defense, which I am a bit surprised by, and I'll get into that why. Um, their offense has been 18th in the league, which is also kind of surprising. So going into the All Star break, they had two All Stars. AD sat out. And while they have been disappointing, obviously a lot of that you could attribute to AD being out, as well as Schroeder missing time with COVID tracing protocols, whatever he missed time with. But back to their defense, I am surprised that they are ranked first in defense. When you watch them, I don't think the eye test passes that, because I think last year they were a better. Last year I think they were ranked first too, or at least top three, still very high. But I'm surprised they're still at one, because I thought that Gasol and Trez at your center spots would be a downgrade from Dwight and JaVale. And I think you can definitely make the case. I would say I've been right on that so far. That Gasol and Trez would be a downgrade from the Howard McGee duo. But when you look at the stats, they're first in offense. So I mean, eye test wise, I would argue they have looked worse on defense, but it seems like they're still getting the job done. But I think even though they are first in defense, you still hear the rumors about how they want to add Drummond or a Hassan Whiteside in the buyout market or a trade. And I think that's just the Lakers, doing their due diligence and understanding, despite being first in defense and what the numbers might say regarding Gasol and Trez, we still need a legit 7-footer that could go out there and block shots and get boards. I think Hassan Whiteside would kind of fit what the Lakers are looking for more in regards to a rim protector, a dude who could block shots. I think Drummond is more of that big body in the paint that's going to grab boards, but I don't view Drummond as, a defensive anchor or a rim protector as I would Hassan Whiteside. And I think that, Gasol has been a little disappointing. I don't think he's been, completely awful, but I think if you would ask Laker fans, he's been disappointing to start the year. He definitely has had his struggles defensively. In the bubble, he had a rough bubble, so I didn't think he was completely washed or cooked like that, but I thought that, the expectations for Gasol coming in to be a legit starter for this team were a bit much, but it seems like the Lakers are doing fine, but you still hear about how they want to add another 7 footer to the team. And moving on to some other additions for the first half of the year, Schroeder has been a great addition to the Lakers. I knew what he could bring offensively, but I've honestly been really impressed with what Dennis Schroeder has brought on the defensive end to the Lakers. I don't think it's been like some first team all defense stuff like some people are saying, but I think he's been closer to great on defense than he is closer to average. Just watching him, the Lakers are a completely different team when Schroeder has played. Even in the games where AD has been out, you could see the clear difference versus the Lakers without both AD and Schroeder, and then with just Schroeder without AD. There's still a big difference in that team, and his offense, it comes and goes. Some nights, Schroeder kind of reminds me of the guy, if he hits his first couple shots, he'll get going the rest of the night. But, if he misses those first couple mid ranges or the first couple threes, it might be a rough night on offense. But what Schroeder has been able to provide for the Lakers has been a legit other ball handler behind LeBron and another defender on that wing. I know they lost Rondo last year, and Rondo was what he was in the playoffs, playoff Rondo, but I think Schroeder will turn out to be, a better addition, and you'll see why the Lakers made that move. And flipping Schroeder for Danny Green, or flipping Danny Green for Schroeder, I should say, has been a great move for the Lakers. You're already hearing rumors about how Philadelphia might trade Danny Green, so that was a great move for the Lakers. I like the Schroeder move a lot more than I liked, any of the Trez, Gasol signings, Wes Matthews signings. Another person that has really stepped up their game on the Lakers has been Kyle Kuzma. And, Kyle Kuzma has taken a step back on offense. I don't think he's a scorer. He was his rookie year, even at times the shooter. But since getting that contract extension, I think he's become more comfortable in his role. And you could see that, I know it's cliche, he does all the little things on defense. He rebounds the ball, steals the ball, blocks shots, but that's that's what has really elevated Kyle Kuzma to be a serious contributor to this team more so than he was last year. Last year, you heard the jokes. He was kind of the knucklehead on the team, that would take the dumb shots and make the bad passes and mess up the defensive assignments. But this year it's been a total complete switch. He's been great on the defensive end. He's brought that energy and hustle every single night. It seems like, he's really flying out there on the defensive end. And it's been great to see for the Lakers. I mean, since getting that contract extension, Kuzma has been everything you wanted him to be, while you would like him, to maybe hit a couple more threes here and there. Um, I think what Kuzma has provided has been great for the Lakers. And of course, with AD out, LeBron is still LeBron. He's still the best player in the league. His MVP candidacy is a little baloney at the moment. I think Embiid's the clear favorite for MVP. I think you could mix at worst LeBron's second, but um, with AD being out, he kind of had the opportunity to kind of jump the lead in that MVP ranking. But like the Jazz, the Lakers, I think they're 3-7 or 4-8, some number like that going into the All Star break. Not a great finish to the first half of the season, but I think that's typical of what you're going to get, from a team that just won the championship, and especially a LeBron-led team. They're going to coast a little bit. They're going to have their struggles. It's post-championship. That's just how it is. And I think it is a little surprising Uh, I don't know if it's surprising, but I think I expected him to be a little better than 18th in offensive efficiency. I think a lot of their obviously AD being out plays a big part in that, but I also think the reason their offense has taken a step back is because guys like KCP and Caruso, who were hitting threes to start the season, have kind of cooled off. Especially KCP, he had like a rough couple weeks there. Caruso, came into the season even though it was like unlimited attempts. He was shooting such a high clip from three, but he's also kind of dropped off in that area. I think Wes Matthews. It's weird. I don't know. Laker fans seem split on him because whenever I watch Wes Matthews, it seems like he always hits a three, but he hasn't filled quite into that Danny Green 3 and D role as I thought he would. So I also think that's also why the Lakers have struggled. So I mean, yeah, that's pretty much on the Lakers. While they have been struggling, I don't think it's anything to panic about. I would have the Lakers as still the second favorites to win the championship. That team in Brooklyn is something else right now. They just signed BG Blake Griffin, which I'll talk about at the end just for the culture. But you also hear about how the Brooklyn Nets might sign Andre Drummond. So I think the Lakers are clearly the second best team in the league, despite their struggles. I expect AD to come back for them from injury, and I expect the Lakers to be in the NBA Finals again. I just think the Lakers need to add a more reliable center at the deadline or buyout market, and I think they will because Rob Pelinka has proved himself to be a great GM, and I think he sees the struggles with Gasol and Trez, and he'll go out. It might not be Drummond, but I think he'll go out and add another 7 footer, whether it's trying to go after Hassan Whiteside or going back and bringing back a JaVale McGee from Cleveland, trading a second round pick or whatever to bring him back. I think that they'll add another reliable big to the roster to kind of round it out. So my expectations for the Lakers second half of the season is to pick it up a bit, especially once AD gets back. AD has been out for a very long period of time. So, I know the Lakers can't wait to get him back and kind of get this thing rolling. I expect him to be in the NBA Finals again. So, moving on to my Los Angeles Clippers, who are sitting at fourth in the Western Conference. They're sitting at 24-14. They are second in offense, which um, I'll talk about why they're second in offense. A lot of that has to do with Ty Lue coming in and kind of, you know, changing up the offense a bit. But they are 18th in defense, which I honestly, I don't know if it's a major concern because when I look at it, when you look at the Clippers, when you get into the playoffs, you have your top eight rotation. And to me, everyone in the starting lineup with Pat Bev, PG, Kawhi, Nicholas Batum, and Serge, they're all plus defenders and have proven to be reliable defenders. And then coming off the bench, you have Zubac and Morris, who I think Zubac is an excellent defender. I think Morris is kind of in that average to above average range. And Lou Williams is the liability on that end. But I think the Clippers being 18th in defense has been kind of a desired thing this year. They've kind of looked a little bit off on that end. And obviously, a lot of that has to do, like I mentioned with the Lakers struggles with AD being out. Obviously, Paul George had that foot injury that kept him out for a little bit. Kawhi has also been out for, 3 or 4 games for a 3 or 4 game stretch. Pat Bev has missed time, which I know people clown on Pat Bev, but that guy is the point of attack on our defensive end, and he's clearly our best defensive guard. I mean, when you look at Lou and Reggie, it's not even close. There's a significant drop off when you go from Pat Bev to whoever's backing him up that night. So I think I expect while their defense is a concern at eight, it being 18th, I don't think it's that bad when you watch them, but I think come playoff time, when you know when the games start getting a little more serious and the intensity picks up. I trust them to be that defensive team we think they are. We see the defense in spurts. When PG, Kawhi, and Pat Bev get clicking on defense with Serge or Zubac defending the paint. It's elite. It's great stuff, but they just haven't been able to get that consistent string of games yet with everyone being out. So I expect their defense to pick up eventually. I don't think it's a major concern, but I think it's something to keep an eye on, because if I told you that the Clippers were going to be 18th in defense for the first half of the season, I think you would say you're pretty surprised by that, given the personnel they have. And then moving on to the offense with the Clippers, they're second in the league behind the historic Brooklyn Nets. So I think that's credit to Ty Lue. Ty Lue has really embraced the three ball for this team. If you look at the Clippers shooting percentages, everyone I think is an above, 35% 3-point shooter on the roster except Ivica Zubac. So Ty Lue has really embraced three ball for this team. And as I've said, other than Zoo and Terence Mann, who has been a surprise this year, they have elite. They don't just have shooters that will hit a three here and there. They have knockdown guys with Pat Bev, Kawhi, PG, Batum. Serge has kind of struggled a little bit this year, but when come playoff time, I expect Serge to be that presence and hit those threes when we need him to. And Ty also has the ball moving much better than it did last year. The Clippers were a top offense rated last year too, but to me that the eye test just didn't pass it, because to me it felt like they ran too much ISO. So, this year Ty Lue definitely has the ball moving around a lot more, which has been great for the Clippers. And, I would be biased if I didn't mention the clutch time struggles that is constantly brought up with the Clippers, and whether this means they need a point guard or, whatever the case may be. Here's the deal to me when you say the Clippers need a point guard. If you tell me, they could get Chris Paul or like Kyle Lowry, then yeah, sure. Then you make that move, because those guys are actual needle movers. But when I hear trades about, bringing in a George Hill or bringing in a Ricky Rubio or a Rajon Rondo, I don't think those guys are that much better than Patrick Beverly, to be honest. I don't see to me, the clutch time offense comes down to just Kawhi and Paul George being better. They just have to be better. They have to make better decisions, and I don't think a point guard really fixes those issues. Most recently going to the break, the Milwaukee game, they didn't score for 4 minutes straight, and it was because PG and Kawhi, they're attacking the wrong guys on defense, not taking advantage of mismatches. And I'm not sure a point guard would really change that, because to me, I don't see the difference. I don't see a difference if Ricky Rubio's on the court versus Pat Bev. Ricky Rubio would probably be in the corner, sitting in the corner while PG and Kawhi do some shit on ISO ball. But I think their clutch time offense really comes down to Kawhi and Paul George being better. And, those guys have to be better. At the end of the day, if Kawhi and Paul George are not going to take you home in the fourth quarter and you need a point guard or quote unquote pass first point guard to set him up, that's not really the difference maker for me. It comes down to Kawhi and Paul George being those dudes and taking over the game. Some storylines for the Clippers this year. Batum has been a much better version of himself than even I expected. I think the consensus, including by me, maybe Batum could kind of improve in a better environment compared to Charlotte, but he's been a lot more than expected. If you told people Batum would be starting over Morris for the Clippers halfway through the season, I don't think people would believe you. And bringing up Morris has been, for the most part, worth that $64 million contract. He's knocking down 48% of his threes. So, he's being the sniper they need him to be. And I think while he has been a little bit disappointing on the defensive end, I think he'll get better with time. He came into the season with a knee injury. So I think he's just still kind of working himself up on the defensive end, but he's been a knockdown sniper. Another surprise has been Terence Mann. He's given that energy for the Clippers during the regular season that they needed. At the end of the day, I still don't trust him come playoff time. His jump shot is still shaky, But during the regular season, you need a guy like Terence Mann, and I'm happy that Ty Lue has, given him the opportunity to show what he could showcase. It might not equate to minutes in the playoffs, but I think the play you see from Terence Mann, you could say, oh look, the Clippers got a contributing player in the second round, which is always nice. Um, I think most people might say Kennard has been a disappointment, especially with the contract extension that he received. I don't know if I've been disappointed um, by Kennard, because I think Ty Lue hasn't really given him a fair shot. Honestly, he gives guys like Lou Williams and Reggie Jackson a much longer leash than he did to Kennard. And when Kennard does play, he's knocking down 45% of his threes. So he is doing his job. I think with Kennard, it just comes with him getting more playing time and getting more reps. Personally, I trust Kennard more than Reggie Jackson to make the right decision and hit an open three. We could talk about Lou Williams. I'm not the biggest Lou Williams fan. I think that, if Ty Lue kind of put an emphasis on putting Kennard in the right situation, Kennard could be a more valuable piece than Lou Williams has been eventually. So kind of wrapping up on the Clippers, their offense has been great. I think that, their defense has been a struggle, and I think that could be attributed to guys missing time. Kawhi and PG missed like 3 games or 2 games with COVID protocols. Kawhi's been hurt, PG's been hurt, Pat Bev's been hurt. I think that the defensive end will come along as guys continue to get more reps. Regarding any decisions that the Clippers might make at the deadline, I don't know. I don't know how you hear Kyle Lowry. I don't think that's very likely. I don't think a move can be made where the Clippers give the Raptors the assets they want. If a move is made, I do expect the Clippers to trade Lou Williams if there's a trade to be made. I think, to me personally, I think Lou's time in LA has ran out, and if there's an upgrade available, you sit hard and think about it. Because Lou Williams to me has been off. Ty Lue's offense is not fit for Lou Williams style. Ty Lue's a bunch of motion, knocking down threes, but Lou Williams, he needs the ball in his hands. He needs the ISO. He needs to create. And I just don't think he's a fit for this team as he was last year in Doc's offense. So, if a move is to be made for the Clippers, expect Lou Williams to be out. But I think the most likely move is for them to trade. They have a rookie on a 1-year deal, Fiondu Kabengele. I expect the Clippers to trade him with a second rounder just to clear his cap space and sign 2 guys on the buyout market. To me, I think the Clippers should go out and sign like a Glenn Robinson or a Rondé Hollis Jefferson, and then maybe trade for a JaVale McGee to kind of shore up their depth. But I think for the most part, the Clippers are going to stand pat, and kind of what you see is what you have for them. So my expectation for the Clippers is, depending on who they play in the second round, if they avoid the Lakers in the second round, I expect them to make a Western Conference Finals. But I expect them to eventually fall to the Lakers, in a 6 or 7 game series. You know, as is, maybe the Clippers actually land Kyle Lowry, and that changes a whole lot. But as is, I would have the Clippers losing in the conference finals. So those are my expectations for the Clippers and kind of their first half of the season. Now, I'm going to kind of briefly go over some other teams, after going over the top 4 seeds in the conference. One team that I thought would be higher and would be a top 3 seed is the Dallas Mavericks. I thought Luka Doncic would have that MVP type season, where he's just carrying everyone on some LeBron, on some crazy LeBron stuff, like triple doubles it like almost every night, almost, and just, kind of willing the Mavericks to wins. But it looks like he came into the season out of shape, and the Mavericks, they started to pick it up now. They didn't click to start the year. Kristaps Porzingis has been out, but even when he's played, there's been clear struggles in his game. You hear a lot about the defense. To me, it seems like KP is like a spot up 7-foot shooter. Honestly, every time I watch the Mavs play, it seems like this guy like takes a pull up like 30, 40 footer sometimes even. So you hear the rumors about how Kristaps might get moved. And, if a trade came up for the Mavericks where they could, get rid of Kristaps' contract and maybe acquire some assets. That might be a move for them. The Blazers sit at the fifth seed. Not much to say on them. Just a shout out to Lillard, because he's been able to keep the team afloat while CJ and Nurkic have missed serious time. And Lillard's kind of creeping up into that MVP spot. The Blazers are you know pretty close in the win column to the Lakers and Clippers, 3 games behind in the win column. So if the Blazers could jump in a top 3 seed, that would be huge for Dame in his MVP case, especially with CJ and Nurkic being out. Um, One team that's been slow to start but is picking it up, it is the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, we know they lost Jeremiah Grant, which it seems like it's been a big loss. He's hooping in Pistons on a bad team, whatever it's worth. He's putting up his numbers, but it seems like Grant would be kind of that integral piece that the Nuggets need as a 3-and-D guy in the lineup with Jokic and Murray. Jokic has been a monster this year. I don't think he's been in MVP status, because the Nuggets have started off slow and aren't quite on the winning percentage that, an MVP type player would be. But Murray has started to pick it up also. Not quite bubble Murray. I know everyone wants to go crazy on bubble Murray, but, even though he's starting to pick it up, that's not, don't get it twisted. It's not going to be anything crazy, but he's starting to improve a little after a really slow start. He had a really, really slow start to the year, not very efficient, but he's starting to pick it up. He had a crazy 50-point game with no free throws, I think it was. So, Murray's starting to get there. Another shout out to the Spurs. They are 7th in the West, but I don't think a lot of people expected them to be there. And I think that DeMar DeRozan kind of got robbed out of a All-Star spot over Mike Conley. I would have given it to DeRozan over Conley, but shout out to the Spurs for being competitive. And then, to kind of finish off the Western Conference, you have teams such as the Warriors, Grizzlies, and Pelicans kind of in that play-in spot, as you would expect them to be. One team that has completely fallen off has been the Houston Rockets. I mean, and I think this is even though Wood has been out and that has hurt him, I think the way the Rockets have been playing is kind of a welcome to life without Harden. I think a lot of people have kind of dismissed Harden and what he meant to that team, because he didn't win a championship, and that's true, but he kept the Houston Rockets extremely competitive, and he was the only guy that even came close to beating the Golden State Warriors during their run with KD. So I think that the Rockets kind of, got a wake up call to what life's going to be without Harden. And it sucks because I'm pretty sure OKC has some of the picks from the Chris Paul Westbrook deal. So no, not a good look for the Rockets right now. And then, other teams, the Kings are still rebuilding. Unfortunately, they did get a good draft pick with Tyrese Halliburton. It seems like that was their good draft pick since Fox in like a decade. So good on the Kings for that. And they have talent. To me, it seems like it's a Luke Walton problem, and you hear that a lot. So I expect Luke Walton to eventually get fired sometime after the All-Star break. And then the last team in the West that I just have to mention this, obviously we know the Wolves have not been good at all and have been pretty embarrassing, but they fired their coach midseason and then hired someone outside of the organization. And I don't even think I could just say that and no further comments are needed. You just see how dysfunctional that environment kind of is. So, yeah, that's going to wrap up the West talk. One thing I do want to bring up is Blake Griffin did sign with the Brooklyn Nets. So, shout out Blake Griffin, still my all-time favorite player, still my all-time favorite Clipper. And while he has been bad this year, I hope that he could turn around a little bit in Brooklyn. I don't expect him to be even close to what he was before. But, I just hope that Blake can contribute to a championship winning team. And, if the Clippers don't win the championship, I would love to see Brooklyn win a championship and get Blake and DJ that ring. So just want to talk about Blake Griffin for the culture right quick. And that's going to wrap up my solo podcast for this one. Again, I'm your co-host, Alex Toma. Please don't forget to show love on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Show love, share it, like it, subscribe, follow, do whatever you can to support the pod. And as always, if there's anything you disagree with, go ahead and contest it. Peace out, y'all.